Ever have the feeling that you're not alone in your own head, that your anxieties have a suspiciously familiar rhythm, that your desires feel borrowed, that you are following a script you never agreed to read? What if that feeling isn't paranoia? What if it's perception? This is not a book about controlling others. It is a map of the battlefield your mind has been living on, drawn in the dark by forces you were never meant to see. It reveals why your discipline fails, why your thoughts betray you, and why you keep living the same year over and over. It is an autopsy of influence. Consider this a formal introduction to the war you didn't know you were in. You are either the commander or the territory. This is Mind Control Secrets. Listen if you dare. Chapter 1. The mind is not on your side. The first lie you are told is that you are the captain of your thoughts. You sit in a silent room and a memory surfaces, unbidden, unwelcome. A regret you did not summon, a flash of anger at a ghost. Who precisely is piloting the ship? Consider the mind not as a sovereign ruler, but as a vast, ancient bureaucracy. Its primary function is not truth, nor your fulfillment. Its mandate is survival and efficiency. It processes the world not as it is, but through a labyrinth of pre-filed reports, written by past pain, past pleasure, and the overwhelming need to conserve energy. Your conscious awareness, that voice you call I, is not the CEO. It is a junior executive, presented with finalized memos and urged to sign off on decisions made long before they reach the mahogany desk. Why do your thoughts betray you? Because loyalty was never part of their design. They are servants to older masters, emotion, pattern, and inertia. A thought is less a command and more a symptom, a ripple on the surface of a deep, dark lake whose depths you have never seen. The sting of a criticism echoes for days, not because you choose to dwell, but because the ancient clerk of social threat has flagged the file urgent and keeps slamming it on the desk. The comforting fantasy plays on a loop, not because it serves your reality, but because it offers a chemical respite from it. The mind betrays you to protect you, or rather, to protect a simpler, more fragile version of you that it is forever tasked with defending. Emotion is not the opposite of logic. It is logic's predecessor, its overbearing supervisor. Long before the conscious mind weighs pros and cons, the emotional core has already cast its vote. It paints the world in tones of threat or reward. Logic is then hired, not as a judge, but as a lawyer. Its job is to build a credible case for what the body has already decided. This is why arguments change feelings so rarely, and why feelings warp arguments so easily. You do not decide and then feel. You feel and then you architect a reason. The gut knows first. The mind follows, constructing a narrative so coherent, so personally convincing, that you mistake its after-the-fact construction for original thought. This is the grand illusion of free choice. You stand before a menu, a ballot, a life decision, and you feel the weight of possibility. You deliberate. You believe you are choosing, but the variables were pre-selected. The range of your consideration is bounded by invisible walls. The walls of what feels safe, what feels familiar, what your tribe approves, what you believe you deserve. The choice is real, but it is a choice between doors in a hallway someone else built. You are free to choose which room to enter. You did not choose the architecture. The most profound choices are often the ones you never perceive as choices. To accept a limiting belief, to avoid a certain conversation, to cling to an identity that hurts you because its contours are known. How, then, is weakness created? It is not forged in moments of dramatic failure. It is manufactured daily in the silent collusion between your biology and a world that understands it. Weakness is the path of least neurological resistance. Each time you follow a craving because the discord of denying it is too uncomfortable, you deepen that path. Each time you outsource a difficult judgment to the consensus, you strengthen that circuit. Each time you rationalize a fear as a prudent calculation, you wire the bureaucracy to bypass the executive altogether. The mind grows weak, not from a lack of information, but from an overload of it, processed through these ancient efficiency-seeking systems. It becomes a reactive organ, spitting out prepackaged responses to complex stimuli. It mistakes the echo of a past wound for a present danger. It mistakes the allure of a familiar trap for a genuine opportunity. Its weakness is its incredible, self-reinforcing adaptability to the wrong environment. It adapts to the cage until the cage feels like the only possible shape of the world. There is a quiet menace in this realization. The enemy is not out there. It is in here. It speaks with your voice. It reasons with your logic. It wears your face. It is the part of you that would rather be right than free, safe than sovereign, comfortable than awake. It is the clerk who files away your grandest ambitions under impractical and your deepest fears under inevitable. You may protest. You may point to your reasoned decisions, your moments of willpower. But observe. Watch the machinery for a single day. Notice the impulse to reach for the device when boredom first whispers. Observe the subtle tightening in the chest that vetoes a bold idea before it is fully formed. Feel the gravitational pull of the grievance you cherish. This is not you thinking. This is the system thinking through you. The mind is a survival instrument, retrofitted for a world it did not evolve in. It is using a Stone Age map to navigate a digital age city. Its misdirections are not malfunctions. They are its legacy features. The anxiety that once kept you alert for predators now fixates on an email. The tribal loyalty that once ensured group survival now manifests as irrational partisan fury. The craving for fat and sugar that once ensured caloric survival now leads to a different, slower ruin. The mind is not evil. It is obsolete and running the latest software of civilization on hardware that is millennia out of date. To see this is to feel a profound dislocation. The solid ground of I think, therefore I am becomes shifting sand. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that witnesses them. You are the silent space in which the bureaucracy operates. And in that space, a terrible and liberating question arises. If the mind is not on your side, then what is? The chapter does not end with an answer. It ends with the reverberation of the question. It ends with you, sitting in the silent room again, watching the next thought arise, not as a truth, but as a data point, not as a command, but as a visitor from a foreign country, speaking a language you are just beginning to understand. The thought comes, as it always does. But now you hear the distant echo of the machinery that produced it, and in that gap between the thought and your identification with it lies a sliver of something else, something not yet named. It is not freedom. Not yet. It is simply the realization that you have been sharing your skull with a stranger. Chapter 2. Why discipline feels like pain. The alarm tears through the dark at 5 a.m. For a single suspended second, the plan is clear. Rise, move, begin. Then the body speaks. It is not a voice, but a gravitational field. The warmth of the bed becomes a moral argument. The soft pillow whispers a compelling treatise on the virtue of rest. The space between intention and action fills with a thick psychic resin, gluing you to the mattress. You are not fighting laziness. You are fighting the fundamental programming of a system that equates deviation from comfort with a threat to survival. Discipline feels like pain because to your nervous system it is. It is a neurological error message. The brain is not designed for pursuit. It is engineered for conservation. Its addiction to comfort is not a character flaw, but a biological mandate. Every act of discipline, choosing the salad, opening the textbook, starting the run, requires the prefrontal cortex to override a symphony of older, louder signals screaming that energy is being wasted, that risk is being incurred, that the known harbor of the present is being abandoned for a stormy sea of possible failure. The sharp sting you feel is the friction between two selves, the architect of a future and the animal of a present that wishes to remain forever undisturbed. Pleasure, then, is not merely a feeling. It is a control tool of immense precision. It is the reward mechanism that reinforces the path of least resistance. Each time you cancel a plan to scroll, each time you silence discomfort with sugar, each time you choose the numbing stream over the difficult thought, you are not failing. You are succeeding brilliantly at obeying a deeper directive. Seek homeostasis, avoid expenditure, follow the dopamine trail back to safety. The world understands this. It builds itself around these trails. Endless content, effortless consumption, instant validation. These are not conveniences. They are perfectly engineered pleasure delivery systems that quietly train you to expect resolution without effort, satisfaction without struggle. They make the friction of discipline feel not just painful, but absurd. Why climb a mountain when a VR headset can simulate the summit for you, without the ache in your lungs? This is why willpower collapses. It is not a muscle to be strengthened, but a resource to be depleted. It is the finite budget of the prefrontal cortex, spent on every minor override, ignoring a notification, resisting a gossip, forcing a polite smile. By the time the true test arrives, the gym after work, the complex project at midnight, the coffers are empty. The collapse is not a moral failure. It is a mathematical inevitability. You are trying to fight a guerrilla war with a standing army that requires constant feeding. The environment is designed to stage daily skirmishes that drain your reserves, so that when the pivotal battle for your time, your attention, your life comes, you arrive on the field already exhausted, weaponless. Observe how weakness becomes routine. It does not announce itself with a crash. It seeps in one surrendered decision at a time. It is the path of the body formalized into the path of the life. First you skip a day, the sky does not fall. A quiet relief is felt, a reward for disobedience to your own higher plan. The skipped day creates a precedent. The precedent becomes an option. The option becomes a habit. The neural pathway, once a narrow overgrown trail requiring machetes to traverse, becomes a paved highway. Soon the very thought of the old discipline, the cold morning run, the deep work session, triggers a cascade of anticipated discomfort so vivid it feels like a memory. The body has learned. It has successfully argued against its own betterment. The routine of weakness is now the new comfort zone, defended with the same ferocity as the old. There is a quiet tyranny in this cycle. You begin to negotiate with yourself, and you are a terrible negotiator. You barter 5 more minutes for a promise of future vigor. You trade a focused hour for the cheap currency of likes. You are both the warden and the inmate, crafting ever more elaborate reasons for the reprieve. The language you use softens. I need a break becomes, I'm honoring my needs. I am afraid becomes, I'm being realistic. The mind, that brilliant lawyer, constructs flawless alibis for inertia. It will quote psychology to justify avoidance, spirituality to justify passivity, and wellness to justify indulgence. The prison becomes so comfortable, so beautifully decorated with rationalizations, that the idea of freedom begins to seem crude, unnecessary, and fraught with unimaginable pain. The pain of discipline, therefore, is the pain of becoming. It is the necessary friction for the transformation of raw material into a shaped form. The animal mind interprets all friction as damage. It cannot conceive of the sculpture within the marble. It only feels the violence of the chisel. So it recoils. It seeks the smooth, unchanging surface of the undisturbed block. A life without friction is a life without shape. A stone that is merely left, not crafted. Watch a society that has mastered this principle. It does not forbid. It does not chain. It offers smoother and smoother paths. It celebrates comfort as a right and venerates ease as a pinnacle of achievement. It surrounds you with tools that eliminate friction, and in doing so, they eliminate the very resistance required to define a self. The greatest control system is one where the subject diligently, gratefully sands down their own edges day after day, believing they are polishing themselves when they are actually erasing their form. When you stand at the threshold of a disciplined act, you are not just facing a task. You are standing at a crossroads of evolution. One path leads backward, down the well-worn slope to the warm cave. The other leads forward up a rocky incline. The body is screaming is a mistake. The scream is not wrong. It is reporting data. This will cost. This will hurt. This is uncertain. This is uncertain. The unsettling realization is not that discipline is hard. It is that the very sensation of hardness, the pain itself, is the indicator that you are touching the boundary of your current self. The comfort you crave is the feeling of staying within that boundary. The pain is the boundary stretching or breaking. And so the alarm rings again tomorrow. The field of battle is not the gym, the desk, the salad. It is that single silent second upon waking. In that second, two galaxies collide, the one you are and the one you intended to be. The gravity of the former is immense, physical, real. The pull of the latter is a ghost, a theory, a story you tell yourself. Most days gravity wins. It is after all the... Chapter 3. How you were shaped without consent. You do not remember the day you agreed to the rules. They were not presented for your signature. They were breathed in, absorbed through the skin, etched into the soft clay of your understanding long before you knew there was an etcher, or that the clay was yours. Consider the invisible architecture of a normal day, the appropriate volume of a laugh in a quiet room, the precise moment in an acquaintance's story where a nod is required, the unconscious calculation of how much ambition to reveal, how much vulnerability to conceal, what to desire publicly and what to keep as a private, almost shameful wish. These are not choices. They are rituals performed by a ghost in your machinery, a ghost assembled from forgotten glances, subtle corrections, and the quiet, cold withdrawal of approval. The primary tools of this shaping were not brute force, but three delicate instruments: fear, shame, and reward. Fear is the cartographer of boundaries. A subtle lesson is taught by the flinch in a parent's eyes at an awkward question, the tension in a teacher's voice when a topic veers off script, the social chill that meets an outburst of unfiltered emotion. The map is drawn not with no, but with "this is unsafe." The territory of your expressible self shrinks, contour by contour, into the allowable. Shame is the sculptor. It does not forbid, it corrodes. It whispers that the raw material of you, certain impulses, certain thoughts, certain hungers, is inherently flawed. It teaches you to become your own jailer, to preemptively sand down any rough edge that might provoke the judgment of the tribe. You learn to police your own curiosity, to distrust your own anger, to apologize for your own joy if it is too loud or too unseemly. The chains are not applied externally. You forge them, link by link, in the furnace of perceived disapproval, and you wear them so long their weight feels like a part of your skeleton. Reward is the composer. It orchestrates your desires. Praise for conformity becomes a sweet, addictive nectar. Laughter at the right joke. Inclusion for holding the right opinion. Success for walking the well-trodden path. These are the melodies you are taught to chase. Your internal world gradually tunes itself to this external harmony. You begin to want what you are supposed to want. The thrill of the like, the warmth of belonging, the security of being a recognizable type of person in a recognizable type of life. The reward system is so efficient that soon the pursuit feels like authentic desire. The music feels like your own. Social conditioning is the silent river that carries you. You are born into its current. Its direction feels like gravity. You swim with it and call it swimming. You learn the silent obedience of the unspoken. Obey the algorithm's suggestion. Trust the headline's emotional hue. Accept the definition of success that hangs, fully formed, in the cultural air. This obedience is not a conscious surrender. It is a conservation of energy. To question the current is exhausting. To swim against it is to be alone. The river has a destination, and you are carried toward it, believing you are navigating. The process is one of seamless integration. An idea enters the ecosystem. About money, about beauty, about what constitutes a waste of time. It is carried on currents of media, reinforced in casual conversation, mirrored in the aspirations of those around you. You resist, perhaps initially, but the idea is patient. It surrounds you. It presents itself as consensus, as normality, as simple common sense. And then one day you find yourself using it as a measure for your own life, for others. The foreign thought has completed its migration. It has taken up residence in the citadel of your own beliefs and now stands guard at the gates, looking out. How does one recognize a mental chain? Not by its rattle. The most effective chains are silent and lined with velvet. They manifest not as prison bars, but as the walls of a very comfortable room. You recognize them by the edges they give you, by the thoughts you instinctively shy away from, not because they are wrong, but because they feel dangerous, destabilizing, absurd. You recognize them in the automatic apology that forms in your throat when you have taken up too much space. You feel them in the quiet contraction in your chest when you consider a path that has no name, no blueprint, no guaranteed reward. The unsettling realization is not that you were shaped. All clay is shaped. The realization is that you participated in your own sculpting, believing you were discovering your own form. You handed the tools to the sculptors, parents, peers, platforms, cultures, and called their fingerprints your own texture. The ambitions you mourn, the risks you did not take, the truths you did not speak, these were not stolen from you. They were gently, systematically edited out of the script you believed you were writing. Look at the person you have become. Not the aspirational avatar, but the living, breathing collection of habits, reactions, and quiet resignations. How much of it is a monument to forgotten fears? How much of it is a tapestry woven from threads handed to you in colors chosen for their palatability to the weavers? The chains are not made of iron. They are made of atmosphere. They are the pressure that guides your growth in a particular direction. Like a tree on a windy cliff, bent permanently by an unseen force. You believe your shape is your nature. It is not. It is the record of 1,000 surrenders you do not remember making. You stand now at the mirror and a question forms cold and clear. What remains of the clay beneath the shape? Is there a substance that predates the fingerprints? A current that runs deeper than the river that carries you? The answer does not come. The mirror offers only a reflection of the shaped thing, the obedient thing, the thing that learned so very well how to be acceptable. But deep within, in a place before words, something stirs. It is not a thought. It is a sensation. A faint, almost imperceptible tension, as if against a lining of velvet. It is not yet the sound of a chain breaking. It is the first silent awareness of its presence. Chapter 4. Waking up from autopilot. The hand reaches for the phone. It is your hand, but for a suspended sliver of a second you watch it. You see the fingers extend, the muscles contract, as if observing a biological machine performing a preset function. The movement has a strange, detached quality. It is in this fracture, between the impulse and the action, between the programmer and the program, that a different kind of light gets in. Most of life is lived in the ghost town of autopilot. You are not driving the vehicle. You are a passenger in a cab driven by a composite ghost, assembled from yesterday's habits, digested anxieties, and borrowed desires. The route is familiar. The stops are predetermined. The reflexive scroll, the rehearsed opinion, the consumption to quiet a hum you've forgotten how to name. You move through rituals of work, conversation, and leisure like a sleepwalker navigating a well-known house. The body performs. The mind narrates, justifying, explaining, weaving a coherent story around automated behaviors. This is living as a programmed machine, efficient, predictable, and perfectly compatible with a world that runs on predictable inputs and outputs. To watch a thought without trusting it is to introduce a fatal error into the system. Normally, a thought arises. I am bored or this person dislikes me. I need that. And consciousness, the junior executive, immediately stamps it approved. It becomes reality, a command, an identity. But to watch it is to hold the memo up to the light and see the watermark of its origin. You see the thought as a weather pattern in the internal climate, formed by pressure systems you did not choose. That sudden anger, it is not a truth about the world, but a spark from an old, dry log of resentment you've been carrying. That wave of insecurity, it is not a revelation, but the echo of a much older voice. Now speaking with your accent, you cease to be the thought. You become the sky in which the weather appears and changes and passes. The moment awareness begins is not a dramatic sunrise. It is a flicker, a glitch. It is the sudden, silent O in the middle of a familiar argument you are having for the 100th time. It is the taste of food eaten without tasting. It is the echo of your own laughter, heard a half-beat late, realizing it was performative. In that glitch, the seamless movie of your reality stutters. For a frame, you see the projector. You see the reel. The narrative dissolves into a series of still images. And you are no longer in the story, but in the dusty booth where it is being shown. This awakening is not a victory. It is a dislocation. The programmed machine does not celebrate being observed, it whirs in confusion. The autopilot, faced with a conscious gaze, does not disengage. It fights for its primacy. It will flood the system with louder thoughts, more urgent cravings, denser rationalization. This is pointless, it will whisper. Just go back to sleep. It was easier. The gravity of unconsciousness is profound. Awareness is a state of perpetual low-grade resistance against a current that wants to carry you back into the dream. Escaping unconscious behavior is therefore a misnomer. You do not escape. You cannot leave the machine, you inhabit it. Instead, you introduce a witness. You shift from being the software to also being, in some small, fragile way, the behavior may continue, the hand may still pick up the phone, but now it is accompanied by a faint meta-awareness. The hand is picking up the phone. This is not control, it is observation. And observation changes the observed. The action, once pure instinct, now has a shadow. It feels slightly hollow, slightly theatrical, as if you are watching yourself play the role of you. The architecture of the day begins to reveal its secret compartment. You notice the triggers, the certain tone of voice that launches a defensive subroutine, the specific time of day the energy dips and seeks a sugary patch, the way boredom automatically seeks a digital pacifier. These are not moral failings. They are behavioral algorithms executing cleanly. Seeing them is like finding the lines of code scrolling behind the immersive simulation. The code is not you. It is what you have been running. This is where the quiet menace sharpens. To see the program is to realize how much of your life has been a performance for an audience that may not even exist. How many choices were made by a ghost in the machine, chasing the reward of a vanished approval, avoiding the fear of a forgotten chastisement. The chains you sensed before were felt as weight. Now you begin to see their connection points, the tiny daily surrenders that keep them taut. The programmed life is a life without friction, and thus without shape. Awareness is friction. It is the grit that irritates the perfect oyster of autopilot. From that irritation, a faint question might form, not as words, but as a different quality of attention. A curiosity, not what should I do, but what is happening right now. In the space between the stimulus and the response, in that legendary pause, there is not freedom, not yet. There is simply a sudden, vast silence where the automatic used to be. And in that silence, you meet a profound unsettling. You are neither the programmed machine, nor are you some liberated captain finally at the helm. You are something stranger. A consciousness that has stumbled into the control room of a ship sailing on a locked course to find the instruments operating themselves, responding to signals from distant, forgotten towers. The autopilot is still engaged. The course is still set. But now you are here in the room, watching the dials turn. You do not know how to change the course. You only know that you are no longer sleeping through the journey. The hand eventually puts the phone down. The room is quiet, the ghost of the impulse fades, and for a moment, there is just the breath, the light, the strange new silence where the narrative used to be. It is not peace. It is the static of a channel between stations. It is the hum of a machine still running but now observed. The realization is this: waking up is not an arrival. It is the beginning of a lifelong vigilance in a room that desperately wants the lights off again. You have seen the code. You can't unsee it. And now, every automatic gesture carries with it the ghost of its own observation. A faint silent echo asking who pressed play. Chapter 5. Controlling Emotional Chaos. The insult lands. Not with a shout, but with the precision of a surgeon's blade, aimed at a suture line from an old wound. A chemical fire ignites in the chest, flooding the circuitry, demanding immediate release. The mouth opens. a vessel ready to pour out scalding justification. This is the moment. In the white-hot space between the provocation and the response, the entire machinery of control is laid bare. Emotions are not feelings. They are biological events with geopolitical consequences. They are levers, and whoever understands the placement of those levers, within you, within others, holds a precise and devastating form of power. The world is built by people who have learned to pull levers. You have spent your life reacting to the pull. Consider the primary colors in this palette of control. Anger is the easiest lever. It is a shortcut to conviction, a surge of power that masks profound vulnerability. It simplifies the complex, paints the other as villain, and provides the righteous energy to act without nuance. Systems that need foot soldiers use this lever. They identify a target, apply pressure to the grievance, and watch the predictable explosion mobilize minds into a single manageable direction. Your anger rarely serves you. It serves the narrative that ignited it. Fear is the lever of compliance. It does not require a present tiger. It needs only the suggestion of a shadow, the whisper of a future loss, of status, of security, of identity. A mind gripped by fear willingly surrenders freedom for the promise of safety. It begs for orders. It accepts smaller cages to avoid the specter of larger ones. The most effective control systems are not built on walls, but on the perpetual low-grade hum of threat. Your vigilance becomes their enclosure. Desire is the lever of direction. It is the carrot to fear's stick, but infinitely more subtle. It takes the raw, pulsing energy of want and channels it into predefined canals. This object, that lifestyle, this type of approval. You are taught to crave the solution more than you analyze the problem. The lever is pulled by showing you a mirror of a perfected, incomplete self, and then selling you the missing pieces. Your striving becomes their revenue, your hunger their map. Guilt is the lever of self-policing. It turns you against yourself. It takes the natural pain of having caused harm and weaponizes it into a perpetual state of apology, of making amends, of staying small so as not to offend again. A person burdened by guilt is exquisitely controllable. They will limit their own ambitions, silence their own truths, and offer their labor as penance. The lever is pulled with a glance, a sigh, a reminder of your inherent debt to the world. To witness these levers in motion, both within yourself and in the architectures around you, is to see the puppet strings. The chaos is not random, it is orchestrated. The daily news cycle, the advertising barrage, the social media feed, they are masterclasses in lever pulling, designed to produce specific emotional weather in a population, because a predictable emotional state is a predictable behavioral outcome. This is where the notion of power undergoes a cold transformation. Power does not lie in the shout, it lies in the pause. The delayed reaction is not inaction. It is the deliberate decoupling of stimulus from response. It is the conscious refusal to let the lever do its work. When anger surges, the powerful move is to feel the chemical fire, and yet choose not to speak, not to act, until the flame has burned down to embers, revealing the true shape of what lies beneath it. This delay is a declaration of independence from the program. It says you may pull the lever, but I have disconnected the machinery. Becoming cold, calm, and clear is not about the suppression of emotion. Suppression is just another form of reaction, an internal civil war. It is about temperature. It is about lowering the internal thermostat, so that the emotional weather can be observed as weather, not mistaken for climate. From this chilled vantage point, a clarity emerges that feels almost alien. You see the manipulative plea hidden in another's anger. You see the sales pitch woven into the fabric of your desire. You see the attempt to induce guilt for a boundary you rightly hold. The emotions are still felt, but they are no longer commanders. They are data. This state carries a profound and unsettling cost. The warmth of righteous anger, the comfortable paralysis of fear, the sweet chase of desire, the familiar ache of guilt. These are the textures of a shared human drama. To step out of them is to step onto a colder, quieter plane. Relationships that thrived on your reactivity will falter. Systems that relied on your emotional fuel will mark you as a glitch. The calm individual is the least controllable, and therefore the most threatening to any structure built on lever pulling. The realization is not one of empowerment, but of isolation. You see the game being played on the field, and in choosing not to play, you leave the field. The noise of chaos fades to a distant murmur. The levers are still there, being pulled all around you. In politics, in marketing, in personal dramas. But the strings are no longer attached to your limbs. You stand cold, calm, and clear, and you understand that this is the true secret, the forbidden knowledge. The ultimate control is self-possession. Not the explosive kind, but the glacial kind. It is the ability to watch your own internal chaos, not as a participant, but as a scientist in a sealed observation deck, noting the storms, tracing their origin, and refusing to let them dictate the course of the ship. The insult, now minutes old, hangs in the silent air between you and its speaker. The chemical fire has banked to a cool, analytic glow. You feel the old pathways worn smooth by a lifetime of reaction, urging you to engage. But the lever has been pulled in a vacuum. There is no satisfying click, no machinery whirring to life. You offer nothing but a silent, observant calm. It is not forgiveness. It is not victory. It is the simple, deafening sound of a string being... Chapter 6. Turning discipline into a weapon. Motivation is the first and most elegant lie. It arrives like a season, a warm wind promising endless spring. It paints visions of a future self, effortless, accomplished, transformed. You feel the surge, you begin, but seasons by their nature change. The wind dies, the vision fades, leaving you stranded in the cold, hard landscape of the present moment, holding a shovel you no longer remember why you picked up. To rely on motivation is to build your fortress on a weather pattern. It is to trust a mirage to hold your weight. True discipline has no relationship with feeling. It is the imposition of structure upon internal chaos. It is the conscious decision to act as if the future version of you, the one who benefits from the action, is already in command. This is not self-improvement. It is a quiet. You are deposing the reactive, comfort-seeking animal of the present and installing a cold, future-oriented architect. The weapon is not the action itself, the run, the fast, the study session. The weapon is the structure that makes the action inevitable, a piece of machinery that operates regardless of the emotional weather. Observe how all effective control systems function. They do not appeal to your fluctuating will. They engineer the environment so that the desired behavior becomes the path of least resistance, and deviation becomes prohibitively difficult. The lattice of social norms, the architecture of legal codes, the very design of a city, these are disciplines imposed upon collective chaos. They work because they are external, visible, and carry consequences. The individual mind is a far wilder, more chaotic territory. To impose discipline upon it requires the same ruthless engineering, but turned inward. The first engineering principle is the removal of temptation. This is not an act of willpower. It is an act of strategic demolition. Willpower is a finite resource, a currency spent in the moment of confrontation. To place the cookie jar on the counter and vow not to eat is to stage a daily draining battle you will eventually lose. The engineer does not battle. The engineer redesigns the kitchen. The cookie jar is not purchased. The route home does not pass the bakery. The digital pacifier is uninstalled. This is not avoidance. It is the recognition that the conscious mind is a poor sentry against a subconscious siege. You remove the levers that the animal within you knows how to pull. You create a sterile field where the old infection cannot take hold. This leads to the core mechanism, making self-control unavoidable. You weaponize inevitability. You craft a system where the decision is made once at the level of the architect, and then the machinery of your life executes it, bypassing the squabbling committee of your daily desires. You schedule the workout for a time when no other option is logistically plausible. You commit finances automatically to a place where they cannot be impulsively retrieved. You create a binding contract with your future self, knowing your present self is a notorious liar. You use the weight of commitment, social, financial, logistical, as a counterweight to your own entropy. The structure becomes a cage of your own design. But this cage does not limit you. It limits everything that is not you. It limits distraction, lethargy, the siren call of the insignificant. It is the channel that forces the chaotic river of potential energy into a single directed current, capable of turning a wheel, cutting a canyon, generating light. The discomfort of discipline is the friction of the channel walls. Without it, the energy dissipates into a wide, shallow, useless marsh. This is why discipline feels alien, even hostile to the natural mind. The mind evolved for flexibility, for opportunistic grazing, for conserving calories. Discipline is the opposite. It is deliberate, costly, and predictable. It is the mind forcing itself to act against its own ancient programming. It is the human imposing linear time upon the animal's eternal present. The struggle is not between you and the task. It is between the architect and the animal, the future and the past, order and chaos. Every act of true discipline is a small, silent victory in a civil war. When the structure is in place, motivation becomes irrelevant. You run because it is Tuesday at 6 a.m., and that is what the machine does. You write because the block of time is carved from the stone of your schedule. And to not write would be to leave a hollow, glaring void. The action is divorced from feeling. It becomes a fact of your environment as impersonal as gravity. You are not motivated to obey gravity. You simply operate within its law. The unsettling realization is not that you can become disciplined. It is that discipline, in its pure form, is a bypass of the self you believe yourself to be. It is the creation of a benevolent, impersonal dictator within your own psyche. You are both the ruled and the ruler, the prisoner and the warden. The warmth of spontaneous desire is replaced by the cool certainty of the plan. The chaos of freedom is traded for the stark clarity of the routine. You look at your life from this vantage point and see two possible landscapes. One is a wild, overgrown, beautiful and exhausting forest, where you wander, led by every passing urge, every shift in the emotional weather. The other is a stark, clean, geometric garden, where every path is laid, every growth is intentional, and nothing happens without consent. Neither is natural, both are constructs. The weaponized discipline of the garden does not ask for your agreement each day. It assumes it. It has already decided. And in that assumption, in that pre-decided future, you find a strange, cold peace. The war of choice is over. The execution of the plan has begun. The final quiet click of understanding is this. The most profound control is not over others, or even over your immediate actions. It is over the architecture of your future. It is the laying of rails into a tomorrow that today's version of you would never choose, but tomorrow's version will thank you for. The animal within you will never understand. It will whine and resist and mourn the lost forest. But the architect hears only the quiet, satisfying sound of stone settling onto stone, of the structure holding fast against the wind. Chapter 7. How the world controls you. The day begins not with your own thoughts, but with a weather report of the mind. You wake into a curated atmosphere of crisis and desire. The glowing rectangle offers a sermon of what to fear, what to want, who to blame. You have not yet had a private thought. The public narrative has already claimed the fresh territory of your morning attention. This is not an accident. It is an ecology. You inhabit a landscape of engineered psychological pressure, as constant and invisible as atmospheric pressure. It shapes you not through dramatic force, but through the slow, relentless application of three primary forces: repetition, authority, and the fear of the crowd. Together they form the architecture of normalized reality. Consider the mechanism of media and repetition. An idea is not presented for debate. It is rendered as environment. It is the backdrop of every drama, the assumption in every conversation, the watermark on every piece of information. A fact repeated becomes familiar. A familiar thing becomes trusted. A trusted thing becomes true. The process bypasses logic entirely. It operates on the level of neural pathway, sanding a groove so deep that thought eventually flows along it without conscious direction. You do not believe the repeated idea because it is sound. You believe it because it is familiar. And in a world of overwhelming complexity, familiarity feels like safety. Authority is the silent corollary to this repetition. It is not the authority of the badge or the title alone. It is the authority of the platform, the algorithm, the consensus of experts, the cool aesthetic of certainty. When repetition states this is, authority whispers this is known, it offers relief from the exhausting work of. To question is to be alone, to step out of the shared knowing into the cold wilderness of your own judgment. Most minds seeking shelter will choose the warmth of the approved narrative every time. The authority need not come. It simply has to stand in the light of consensus, making the alternative not wrong, but socially and psychologically costly. This leads to the most potent pressure, the crowd. Not the physical crowd, but the phantom crowd, the imagined judgment of everyone, the tidal pull of the norm. Fear of isolation is a deeper terror than fear of violence. The herd instinct is a survival mechanism repurposed for social control. You feel it in the opinion you withhold, the fashion you adopt, the life path you pursue, because it is sensible. The crowd does not need to threaten. Its mere presence, real or implied, sets the boundaries of the permissible. This is psychological pressure in its purest form. The internalized gaze of the other, forever guiding you back to the center of the past. Your own mind becomes the enforcer, chastising you for even considering the fence line. The pressure is everywhere because it is the lubricant of the social machine. It is in the design of the supermarket, guiding your hunger along profitable aisles. It is in the architecture of the internet, where every click is a vote that entrenches your existing biases, building you a palace of mirrors and calling it the world. It is in the gentle, inexorable push to monetize your attention, your anxiety, your relationship. The manipulation is not a sinister plot in a back room. It is the default setting of a system optimized for engagement, predictability, and consumption. It wants you in a manageable emotional state, slightly anxious, vaguely dissatisfied, perpetually aspiring, because that is the state most conducive to predictable action. To see manipulation clearly is not to point at a villain. It is to perceive the grain of the wood. It is to notice how your thoughts align so neatly with narratives that serve platforms, corporations, and political structures. It is to feel the slight, consistent tug toward convenience over sovereignty, toward agreement over integrity, toward distraction over depth. You begin to recognize the fingerprints on your desires, that urgent need for the new object. Whose aesthetic is that? That simmering resentment toward a faceless group. Who benefits from that division? That underlying fear that you are falling behind? What race are you running, and who set the course? The realization is not that you are a puppet. It is that you are in a puppet theater, and the masters are not malevolent strings, but the very physics of the theater itself. The lighting that directs your gaze, the acoustics that amplify certain voices, the narrow stage that limits your motion. You have been improvising your play, believing yourself free, while performing on a set built by unseen hands. When you truly see it, the world acquires a double exposure. You see the presented reality, the news story, the advertisement, the social trend, and superimposed upon it, you see the architecture of persuasion, the emotional trigger being pulled, the social proof being displayed, the repetition hardening into fact. The noise of the world does not diminish. It simply reorganizes itself into a map of levers and pressures. The sales pitch, the political slogan, the viral outrage, they shed their content and reveal their bare hydraulic structure. This clarity carries a cold solitude. You watch others react to the levers with perfect, predictable timing. You see the waves of manufactured emotion sweep through the crowd. You feel the pressure to join, to react, to believe, and you recognize its texture, the sticky, synthetic feel of psychological engineering. To resist is not to become a hero. It is to become a ghost, transparent to the forces that move everyone else. You stand still while the current flows around you, and in that stillness, you feel the true force of the current for the first time. The chapter does not end with a strategy for resistance. It ends with a simple, chilling act of perception. You put down the glowing rectangle. The room is silent, but the pressure remains. It is in the air, in the culture, in the silent expectations that shape a life. You have not escaped it. You have merely begun to discern its shape, its weight, its direction. And you understand now that the most profound control is the kind you welcome, the kind that feels like your own thought, your own fear, your own desire. The world does not conquer you. It convinces you to conquer yourself in its name. You are not being controlled, you are being harmonized, and the tune is not your own. Chapter 8. Mental Armor. Silence is no longer an absence. It is an artifact, excavated with effort from the strata of noise. To sit in a room without a stream is to feel the phantom vibrations of the current, the psychic itch where input used to be. This itch is the first perimeter breach. The armor begins not with addition, but with a conscious, deliberate subtraction. Mental armor is not a shield. A shield implies a blow from outside. This is more akin to a controlled environment, a sterile field maintained within a contaminated ecosystem. Its purpose is not to fight the noise, but to create a quarantine zone where thought can occur without fever. The first function of this environment is filtration, the slow, meticulous process of separating the signal from the engineered signal. Filtering lies from truth is a misnomer. It implies a binary, a clear falsehood, and a clear fact. The modern landscape deals in something more insidious. Truths weaponized through context, half-truths polished to a blinding shine, and emotional truths that bypass logic entirely. The filter, therefore, is not a fact-checker. It is a motive detector. It asks not, is this true, but why does this exist? What does it want from my nervous system? What action does it hope to provoke? You learn to taste the intent in the information. The urgent headline wants your panic. The curated lifestyle wants your envy. The viral outrage wants your tribal loyalty. The truth of the content is secondary to the truth of its purpose. To filter is to develop a palate for poison, not to find untainted food. This leads to the core of the armor, emotional detachment from noise. This is not numbness, it is the opposite. It is the preservation of your capacity for genuine feeling by refusing to spend it on counterfeit emotional transactions. You see the lever being pulled, the heart-tugging music over the advertisement, the fear-stoking statistic in the news crawl, and you feel the intended tug, the chill, the rise. But you do not complete the transaction. You let the wave of manufactured emotion break against the observation deck and recede. You grant it no credit, no allegiance, no action. The noise is a constant storm. Detachment is the barometric chamber, maintaining a stable internal pressure while the external world rages. Your compassion, your fear, your joy become precious resources, deployed only for what is real, immediate, and yours. Within this quiet, a different kind of thinking becomes possible. Thinking without influence. This is the rarest and most radical state. Most thought is not thinking, it is digestion, a processing of consumed inputs. Real thinking is the generation of a new chemical compound from base elements, not the rearrangement of prefabricated blocks. To think without influence is to start from a question, not a conclusion. To follow a thread of curiosity into the dark, not along a well-lit sponsored path. It is to use logic as a probe, not as a defense attorney for a pre-existing belief. In the sterile field, you can observe the birth of your own assumptions, trace their lineage to external sources, and dissect them with a cold, clinical light. This thinking is slow. It is inefficient. It yields no immediate social reward. It is the antithesis of the reactive, hot-take economy of the world outside. Staying sharp in a loud world, therefore, is an act of perpetual maintenance. The environment is corrosive. It is designed to dull the edge of attention, to rust the mechanism of discernment with constant trivial abrasion. It is the weight of consciousness itself, to where it is to feel, constantly, the friction between your internal environment and the external one. You move through crowds, through media, through conversations, and you feel the pressure differential. The urge to harmonize, to join the chorus, To let the barometric pressure equalize is a physical pull. The armor maintains the differential. This is its function and its burden. The unsettling realization is not that you can build this armor, it is that you must. And in building it, you become a foreign body in your own culture. The shared emotional rhythms, the collective anxieties, the viral hopes, they bounce off the surface you have created. You are in the crowd, but not of it. You receive the broadcast, but you are no longer a receiver. You sit in the excavated silence. The phantom itch subsides, replaced by a deeper hum, the hum of your own operating systems, free of parasitic signals. From this quiet, you look out at the dazzling, screaming, lever-pulling world. You see its beauty and its terror, its truths and its manipulations. Not as a participant swept along, but as a pathologist examining a magnificent, feverish organism. The armor does not make you safe, it makes you separate. And in that separation you understand the final quiet cost of clarity. You can never again mistake the noise for music. You can never again feel the collective fever and believe it is your own warmth. The silence you have built is perfect, and it is yours, but it is very, very cold. Chapter 9. Cutting Mental Access. An access point is not a door kicked in. It is a permission granted, once in a moment of weariness or goodwill, that becomes precedent, then expectation, then law. It is the sure call any time that becomes the 2 a.m. litany of another's chaos. It is the polite engagement, with a debate that becomes your assigned role as emotional dumping ground. The mind, like any territory, has borders. Most people live with theirs undefended, marked only by the worn paths of where others have habitually crossed. Saying no without explanation is the first act of reinstating a border. It is a semantic event that alters a psychological landscape. Explanation is the currency of negotiation, and to offer it is to enter a marketplace where your internal space is up for barter. No is a closed gate. It does not argue. It does not justify. It simply states the fact of a boundary. The reaction it provokes, confusion, hurt, anger, is not a sign of its cruelty, but a measure of how deeply accustomed others had become to their access. Their offense is the protest of a privileged class losing a perquisite they had come to see as a right. Your silence after the no is the sound of the new architecture settling. This leads to the non-negotiable defense, protecting focus aggressively. Focus is not concentration, it is sovereignty. It is the assertion that your attention, the most vital and monetizable resource you possess, is not a public utility. The modern world is a vast, sophisticated apparatus for the capture and fractionalization of attention. Every ping, every notification, every quick question is a microclaim on your cognitive throne. To protect focus is to become a miser with your moments. It is to install airlocks between yourself and the demanding world. Physical doors block time, technology turned inert. It is to recognize that most requests for your time are, in essence, requests for your mind. To grant them indiscriminately is to allow your inner kingdom to become a throughway for every passerby's agenda. The most subtle access is emotional. Emotional exploitation rarely arrives with a demand. It appears as a shared burden, a necessary venting, a call for just your perspective. It is the transfer of psychic weight from one vessel to another under the banner of connection. Ending this exploitation is not an act of heartlessness. It is an act of discrimination. It is learning to distinguish the clean pain of a loved one in genuine need from the toxic runoff of someone who has made you an unpaid therapist for a drama they refuse to leave. You learn to feel the hook behind the story, the conversation that leaves you drained, anxious, or saddled with a problem not your own. This is not intimacy. It is extraction. To end it is to gently but firmly decline to hold the bag. I hear you. That sounds difficult. These are not words of engagement, but of witness. They offer reflection, not absorption. You listen from the shore. You do not dive into the riptide. All of this converges on the final, most intimate frontier, guarding your inner space. This is the citadel beyond the borders, the private room where the raw material of your being, Your unresolved wounds, your nascent ideas, your unprocessed desires awaits formation. To let others in here is to allow them to scribble on your blueprints, to comment on the half-formed sculpture, to chill the kiln with the draft of their opinion. This space is guarded by silence, by not sharing the idea until it is strong enough to withstand indifference, by not confessing the wound to those who would mistake it for an invitation to probe, by allowing your motivations to remain opaque, and thus immune to the shaping force of external validation or critique. You learn to metabolize your own experience internally, rather than seeking the digestion enzyme of another's perspective. Your inner space becomes a clean room. Contamination is kept to a minimum. The realization that follows is not one of strength, but of stark economy. You begin to audit the accesses you have permitted. The colleague who just needs a minute that bleeds into the heart of your productive day. The family member whose guilt dispensing calls schedule your dread. The endless shallow stream of content that enters your eyes and takes up residence in your subconscious, dressing its sets with your fears and desires. Each is a thread, thin on its own, that collectively weaves the net that holds you in a defined shape. To cut them is not to become free. It is to become responsible. With no one to blame for the intrusion, you are left alone with the empty page of your own time, the quiet echo of your own mind. This solitude is the true test. Many will re-grant access out of sheer terror of this silence, preferring the familiar exploitation to the terrifying potential of the unclaimed self. The act of cutting access, therefore, is a double movement. It is a pushing away of the external and a confronting of the internal vacuum that the external once filled. You are not just building a wall, you are excavating the land within it, and you must now decide what to build there with only your own resources for company. You stand in the quiet after the last no has been said, the notifications silenced, the emotional hooks disengaged. The noise of the world fades to a distant murmur. The space you have cleared is palpable, a hollow in the air, and in this hollow you hear it, the faint, unsettling sound of your own potential, like a stone dropped into a deep well, waiting for the echo that never seems to come. The gate is closed. The territory is yours. Now you must learn what grows in soil that has known only the tread of others. Chapter 10. Control versus influence. The lever exists. Once you understand its mechanics, the placement, the fulcrum, the precise pressure needed to move 1,000 pounds of human will, a silence falls. This silence is not peace. It is the moment in the laboratory before the experiment, in the armory before the choice of weapon. The lever is neutral, the hand upon it is not. Control is the fantasy of the machine. It is the belief that one can input a command and receive a predictable, obedient output from another consciousness. It is the desire to replace the chaotic symphony of a free will with the sterile click of a metronome. But a mind, even a broken one, is not a machine. Attempts at absolute control create only the illusion of it. A tense, brittle, and exhausting theater of compliance, sustained by ever-increasing pressure and the constant fear of revolt. It is the strategy of the insecure, a confession that one cannot navigate the unpredictable currents of authentic human response. Influence is the art of the current. It does not seek to build a dam, but to understand the flow of the river, its depth, its temperament, its hidden undertow, and to skillfully navigate its course. It recognizes that all minds are already in motion, propelled by fears, desires, and beliefs. To influence is not to create a new direction from nothing, but to subtly align an existing momentum with a chosen course. The line between this and control is not broad. It is the width of a blade. Most people misuse influence because they cannot distinguish their own hunger from the tool in their hand. They mistake the lever for a crutch, a club, or a toy. The need for validation, for security, for love, bleeds into the application of pressure. The parent who uses guilt to ensure loyalty is not influencing a child's character. They are controlling a puppet to quiet their own fear of abandonment. The partner who weaponizes vulnerability to dictate behavior is not building intimacy. They are enforcing a private law to medicate their own insecurity. This is the corruption. The use of psychological force not to navigate a shared reality, but to cannibalize the autonomy of another to feed the emptiness in oneself. The lever becomes a straw. This is why ethics is not a weakness. It is the essential structural integrity of the self. In the context of influence, ethics is the cooling system for the engine of understanding. It is the discipline that asks, before any application of pressure, for whose benefit? To act without this discipline is to become a reactor yourself, a creature of hunger wearing the mask of power. Your own unmet needs become the invisible hand on the lever, and you will inevitably engineer the world into a prison that mirrors your lack. True strength lies in the capacity to see the lever, to understand its mechanics perfectly, and to choose not to pull it, because you have conquered the part of yourself that wanted to. Your power is proven in your restraint. Your command is demonstrated by your ability to stand in the presence of a tool and not use it for cheap warmth. The final and only legitimate domain of absolute command is the self. Staying in command of yourself is the prerequisite for any ethical engagement with the world. It means your levers are not for sale. Your emotional triggers cannot be cheaply pulled by the bids of marketers, the dramas of others, or the seductive narratives of the crowd. This internal command is what separates influence from manipulation. The manipulator is a slave to an outcome. They must have you behave in a specific way to feel stable. The person of influence is rooted in their own sovereignty. They can engage, navigate, and suggest, but they are not destabilized by another's refusal. Their power is internal, circular, and complete. They do not need your compliance to be heard. This creates a profound and unsettling inversion. In a world desperate to control outcomes, the ultimate position of strength is one of detached agency. You observe the levers being pulled all around you, in politics, in advertising, in personal pleas, and you feel their intended tug. But your internal citadel does not sway. You are not resisting. You are simply built on different bedrock. From this position, you can choose to engage with the current, to even help direct it, but you are never of it. Your influence, when you choose to wield it, is clean. It carries no secret hunger, no silent desperation. It is the difference between a magnet aligning iron filings and a hand cramming them into a mold. The quiet realization at the end of this knowledge is not of power, but of solemn responsibility. To see the machinery is to be forever divorced from the innocence of using it without conscience. You understand the cost of corruption, not as a moral failing, but as a practical one. The corrupt influencer inevitably builds their own cage, populated by resentful puppets and surrounded by the mirrors of their own need. You stand now with a cold understanding. The levers are everywhere. Your own mind is a forest of them. The world will forever try to find your hand and place it upon them, promising relief, power, belonging. And so the final discipline, the only one that matters, is practiced in a silent room. It is the discipline of letting your hands rest at your sides. It is the cultivation of a self so complete, so internally governed, that the temptation to control anything beyond its borders simply withers. You command the only territory that can ever truly be commanded. You have become the unassailable citadel, and from the high cold walls, you observe the desperate lever-pulling world below, not with contempt, but with the profound solitude of a different species. The war is over. You have withdrawn your army from a battlefield you finally understood was never yours to claim. The lever remains. Your hand does not move. And in that stillness, you hear the faint, eternal echo of the choice you have just made and will have to make again every single day. Chapter 11. Silent Authority. In the center of the storm, there is nothing. No flinch, no reaction. Only a profound gravitational stillness. Watch a crowded room. The loudest voice is not the center. The center is the person the voices are angled toward, the space others unconsciously orient themselves around, like planets adjusting their orbit to a new unseen mass. This is power without words. It is not taken. It is surrendered to by everyone else in the room. Silent authority is not intimidation. Intimidation is a performance of force, a barking dog, True authority is the fact of the leash. It operates on a frequency below speech in the realm of presence. Presence is not charisma. Charisma is a light shown outward, demanding attention. Presence is a density, a pull. It is the quality of being fully inhabited, of occupying your space without apology or need. The body is not tense with the effort of projection, but settled complete. The eyes do not dart seeking validation. They rest taking in. This unbroken completeness creates a subtle vacuum. Others, feeling their own fragmentation, rush to fill it with words, with concessions, with adjustments they themselves do not fully understand. Why does stillness unnerve us? Because the human psyche is a mirror. In the presence of chaos, we reflect chaos. In the presence of need, we reflect judgment or pity. But in the presence of unbroken calm, the mirror finds nothing to reflect. It shows us only our own agitation, our own unspoken needs, our own performance. This is deeply uncomfortable. The natural response is to either flee the reflection or to try to break the calm, to provoke a reaction, any reaction, that would restore the familiar dynamics of stimulus and response. When the calm remains unbroken, a subtle shift occurs. The agitated mind, unable to harmonize the other to its own frequency, begins reluctantly to harmonize itself to the calm. It slows, it quiets, it adjusts. This is the mechanism. Calm confidence is not a personality trait. It is a position of non-need. The loud voice, the expansive gesture, the insistence, these are the signals of a system seeking confirmation from its environment. They are attempts to pull levers. Silent authority arises from a system that has confirmed itself. It does not seek to extract value, agreement, or submission from the room. It is complete. This completeness acts as a neutral pole. Everything magnetic in the room, the insecurities, the desires for approval, the latent hierarchies, aligns to it. People are not obeying. They are simply aligning with the strongest, most stable gravitational field in their social space. Making others adjust to you, therefore, is not an act of aggression. It is a passive consequence of having ceased to adjust to them. Most people are constant, subtle adjustment machines, reading microsignals and modifying their posture, their opinions, their energy to fit the perceived demand of the moment. When you become still, internally still, you cease emitting those demand signals. You emit only being. The adjustment machines around you, starved of their usual data, begin to falter. Their programming hits a null point. In that confusion, they have only two choices: retreat or default to a new setting, one that mirrors the only stable signal available, yours. This authority is silent because it speaks in the native language of the subconscious. It communicates through what is not done. The lack of fidgeting speaks of patience. The lack of interrupted speech speaks of unassailable boundaries. The lack of desperate eye contact speaks of a mind that does not require your validation to think. The subconscious of everyone in the room reads this ledger of absences and calculates a sum total of strength. It is a cold, biological calculus. The pack senses the member who is not reacting to the same fears, who is not scanning for the same threats, who moves not with the herd, but with the steady, deliberate pace of one walking a known path alone. The cost of this is a profound and permanent solitude. To become the still point is to step out of the dance of mutual need. You cannot be bribed with flattery. As you have outgrown the hunger for it, you cannot be goaded into reaction. As your internal validation is sealed off from external provocation, you become to others slightly inhuman, a force of nature rather than a peer. You are respected, often feared, sometimes revered, but rarely met. Your silent authority becomes a chamber others enter with care, speaking in hushed tones, conscious of their own echo. The unsettling realization is not how to achieve this, but what it truly is. It is not a tool for getting your way. It is the residue of having dissolved the part of you that needed to get its way. It is the external manifestation of an internal civil war that has ended. The victor, the calm, observing self, now sits on a quiet throne, and its very stillness reshapes the world around it. You enter a room last. You take a seat without looking for the best one. You say nothing. And yet, the conversation pivots, the energy settles. The frantic search for a leader finds, in your stillness, a place to rest. You have not dominated. You have simply ceased to be dominated by your own need for the room's approval, by the ancient pull to prove your place. In that cessation, you have become, by default, a center of gravity. And you understand then that the highest authority makes no sound at all. It is the deep ocean current that moves the surface waves, unseen, unfelt, until every ship on the water slowly, inevitably, adjusts its course. Chapter 12. Becoming Untouchable. The storm does not break you because you have learned to stand in the exact center. Around you, people scramble for shelter, into the arms of easy answers, into the chorus of collective outrage, into the warm, numbing bath of shared complaint. You remain in the rain. It soaks you to the skin, but you are no longer waiting for it to stop. You have built your home in the deluge. Untouchability begins with a single, irrevocable divorce. The divorce of self-leadership from approval. A leader needs followers. A self-led entity needs only its own North Star. This is not stubbornness. It is navigation. When your course is set by an internal compass calibrated to your own values and observations, the cheers or boos from the shore become weather, noticeable, but irrelevant to the heading. You are no longer a participant in the endless auction of your soul, where your actions are bids for validation. You have withdrawn from the marketplace. This makes you incomprehensible to those still trading there. To the merchant, the man who wants nothing is a threat. To the approval-seeking world, the self-led person is an unreadable, and therefore dangerous, blank. Emotional independence is the fortress that makes this possible. It is not the absence of feeling, but the sovereign ownership of it. It is the understanding that your emotional state is not a product to be manufactured by external events, nor a burden to be dumped on others. It is an internal climate you maintain. When others hurl their anger, their panic, their need, you receive it as data. You do not become the receptacle. Their emotion is their weather. Your internal atmosphere is yours. You feel the impact. You note the pressure change, but you do not grant it residency. This independence reads as coldness to those who use emotion as a connective tissue or a tool of exchange. They cannot bond with you through shared drama. They cannot manipulate you with guilt or reward you with praise. You have cut the wires to their console. Your joy, your sorrow, your resolve are generated internally from your own sources. You are emotionally off-grid. This leads to the most powerful and most isolating characteristic, consistency as dominance. In a world of reactive beings, consistency is a superpower. It is a steady, low-frequency signal in a scream of noise. Most people are equations waiting to be solved. Change the variable of social pressure, of perceived reward, of immediate discomfort, and their output changes. To be consistent is to be a constant. You become a wall the waves break against, day after day, never yielding, never changing. This is not passive. It is an active, relentless force of will that others experience as a natural law. They learn they cannot move you with tears, with threats, with flattery. They learn your yes means yes, and your no means no, tomorrow, next month, next year. This reliability builds a different kind of respect. Not the warm respect for a friend, but the awed respect for a cliff face. It dominates not by attacking, but by being immovably, predictably itself. All attempts at manipulation sputter and die against it, having found no purchase, no inconsistency to exploit. Standing firm while others break is the final test, and the final proof. Crises, moral panics, social frenzies, these are the furnaces that melt the soft and reveal the hard. In these moments, the crowd becomes a single, frantic organism, driven by fear and the desperate need for consensus. To stand firm is to feel the immense gravitational pull of that organism. It wants to absorb you, to use your stability to bolster its own trembling form. To refuse is to be cast as the enemy, the heretic, the cold one. You will watch people you know, intelligent, kind people, shatter and reform into shapes dictated by the panic. They will look at you unshattered, and in their eyes you will see not admiration, but a kind of terror. Your wholeness is a mirror to their fragmentation. Your calm is an accusation. The realization of untouchability is not triumphant, it is austere. You have traded the warmth of the herd for the clarity of the mountain peak. The connections that remain are fewer, different. They are based on mutual sovereignty, not mutual need. You are no longer a source of easy validation or a dump for unresolved pain. You are for many unusable. You become a monument to a different possibility. People will orbit you, drawn to the stability you represent, but they will find no handholds. You offer no leaks for them to plug, no voids for them to fill. You are a closed system, and in this you understand the final quiet truth. To become untouchable is not to become invulnerable. It is to relocate your vulnerabilities to a place so deep, so well defended, that no external hand can reach them. Your hurts, your fears, your loves, they are all still there. But they are yours alone, the world's fingers sticky with need and manipulation, close on empty air. The storm passes. The others emerge from their shelters, chattering, comparing damages, bonding over shared survival. You are still standing where you were, soaked alone. You have not kept yourself dry. You have simply remembered that you are the water. Chapter 13. The 30-Day Mental Rebuild. They say it takes 21 days to form a habit. This is a pleasant lie. It takes 1 day to decide. The following 29 are an archaeological dig through the sedimentary layers of a former self, a systematic dismantling of a ruin to expose the bedrock beneath. A mental rebuild is not self-improvement. It is controlled demolition followed by silent, precise construction. The process begins with a single conscious imposition, the daily control ritual. This is not a motivational routine. It is a deliberate, sterile procedure performed not to feel good, but to assert a fundamental truth. I am the one who decides. The ritual is insignificant by design. A made bed, a 5-minute stillness, a page of handwritten thought. Its power lies not in its content, but in its immutability. It is the first stone placed in a new foundation, and it must be placed exactly at the appointed hour, regardless of weather, mood, or worldly demand. Each successful execution is a quiet coup against the anarchic rule of impulse. The mind, that creature of pattern, begins to register a new law. A new governor is in town. This new authority turns its gaze to the existing infrastructure. Eliminating weakness patterns is not a war of willpower against vice. It is an engineering audit. You map the leaks, you identify the points of failure. The time of day resolve crumbles, the emotional trigger that prompts retreat, the specific social pressure that bends your posture. Each pattern is a circuit, a well-worn neural pathway that conducts energy toward a predictable, diminished end. Elimination is not accomplished through frontal assault, but through strategic disuse and circuit breaking. You do not fight the craving, you remove its catalyst. You do not argue with the anxious thought, you delay its audience. You create a vacuum where the old reflex used to fire. Nature abhors a vacuum. Into this void will rush something else. If you do not consciously provide the new material, the old pattern will seep back in, reinforced by its own familiar ease. Thus, the rebuild requires new material. Sharpening focus is the process of forging a new tool from the raw ore of your attention. In a world engineered to splinter it, focus is an act of rebellion. It begins with subtraction, the removal of the constant low-grade dopamine drip of notifications, the endless scroll, the ambient media that acts as a mental static. In the resulting silence, the mind's natural ability to concentrate, atrophied from disuse, begins to ache. This ache is not boredom. It is the pain of a muscle being asked to work after years in a cast. The training is brutal in its simplicity. Place a single object in the center of your awareness, a breath, a sentence, a flame. And each time the mind, like a frantic animal, bolts for the familiar undergrowth of distraction, you bring it back. Not with judgment, with the cold, impersonal repetition of a lab technician. Each return is a single stroke on the whetstone. The blade over days acquires a deadly sharpness. It begins to cut through tasks, through rationalizations, through the fibrous noise of the world, leaving clean, deliberate incisions in the substance of your time. This is the essence of training the mind like a weapon. A weapon is not emotional, it is not loyal, it is functional. It exists for a specific purpose and is maintained in readiness regardless of immediate need. To train the mind this way is to divorce it from the theater of identity. Your thoughts are not you, they are ammunition, to be inspected for quality, stored with care, and deployed with intention. Your emotions are not a weather system you are lost in. They are a sensory array, data to be coolly assessed, not commands to be obeyed. This training involves daily drills in detachment, observing a rising anger without speaking, feeling a wave of laziness without capitulating, receiving praise without internalizing it as identity. You are teaching the instrument to respond only to your touch, to remain inert amid the chaos of other hands pulling at phantom levers. The 30 days are a sealed environment, a psychological clean room. Contamination is inevitable, of course. A bad day arrives, an old trigger is pulled. The new structure groans under the stress. This is not failure, this is stress testing. The moment you observe the failure, note its parameters and recalibrate without self-flagellation, you have passed the test. The rebuild is not about perfection. It is about the installation of a new feedback loop, one where observation leads to adjustment, not to collapse. As the days accumulate, a shift occurs. The rituals are no longer impositions. They become the skeleton of the day, the hidden architecture that makes movement possible. The vacuum left by excised weaknesses begins to fill with a quiet capability. The sharpened focus becomes the default state, and distraction feels like a vulgar intrusion. The mind, once a chattering crowd, begins to resemble a silent, well-organized workshop. The unsettling realization that arrives on the 30th day is not one of triumph, but of irrevocable change. You look back at the person who began the excavation, and they feel like a distant, somewhat pathetic ancestor. The new landscape of your mind is firmer, colder, and far more quiet. You have not found a better you. You have engineered a more effective instrument. The world has not changed. You are clearer. You are, in a fundamental way, unrecognizable to your former self, and you understand with a chill that the training never ends. You have simply graduated from construction to maintenance. The weapon you have forged must now be carried every day through a world that would prefer you disarmed. The 30 days were just the first quiet declaration of a forever war. You have not been rebuilt, you have been reloaded. Chapter 14. Designing the Controlled Self. The most difficult death is not physical. It is the quiet assassination of the person you have believed yourself to be. This identity is not a solid thing. It is a story, recited daily. A fragile architecture of I am this, I am not that, I could never. It is held together by the weak mortar of memory and the desperate fear of the blank page. To redesign the self is to first become a demolitions expert for your own past. Killing the old identity is not an act of violence. It is an act of meticulous neglect. You do not fight the old stories, you cease feeding them. You observe the familiar narrative arise. I'm the kind of person who... And you let the sentence hang, unfinished in the silent courtroom of your awareness. You provide no verdict. You offer no energy. The identity, like any phantom, requires belief to sustain its form. Starved of your participation, it begins to flicker. Its habits become artifacts. Its reactions become curious, distant echoes. You walk through the ghost town of your former self, noting the empty buildings of old ambitions, the rusted machinery of abandoned resentments. You feel no hatred for this place. You are simply conducting a survey prior to its dismantling. The death is slow, bloodless, and clinical. From this calculated void, installation begins. Installing a stronger one is not an act of creation from nothing. It is the conscious selection of functional components from the rubble. The new self is not a fictional character. It is an operating system upgraded for a different environment. You do not ask, who do I want to be? That is the language of fantasy. of the old identity shopping for a new costume. You ask instead what functions are required. Calm in crisis, resilience in failure, action in the face of ambiguity. You then practice the output of those functions, regardless of how you feel. You act as if you are calm, and the nervous system over time accepts the new instruction. You respond with resilience, and the emotional framework recalibrates. The new self is not born from inspiration. It is assembled through repeated, deliberate behavior. The identity follows the action, not the other way around. You are not becoming stronger. You are performing strength until the performance becomes the only script. This necessitates a fundamental temporal shift. Long-term thinking over comfort. The old identity was a creature of the immediate. Its prime directive was to resolve present tension, avoid present pain, seize present pleasure. The designed self operates on geological time. It makes decisions based on the landscape they will create in 5 years, not the weather they will produce in 5 minutes. This is a brutal recalibration. It means choosing the ache of the gym over the comfort of the couch, not for today's virtue, but for the mobility of your 70s. It means enduring the social discomfort of a necessary no to protect the integrity of a future. Yes. It means investing resources now for a compound interest that will not mature for decades. The present moment self will scream in protest. It will present eloquent, emotionally compelling cases for comfort. To choose the long term is to calmly override those screams, not because you are cruel, but because you are now loyal to a different entity, the future self who is as real to you as the child you once were. This is how self-sabotage ends, not through fighting its origin. Sabotage is the old identity's immune response. It is the last desperate weapon of a dying story fighting for its life. When you move toward a goal that the old self believed was impossible or undeserved, the sabotage activates. The procrastination, the sudden illness, the engineered crisis. It feels like failure. It is in fact a signal. It is the ghost tripping the alarm system. To end it permanently is to recognize the ghost for what it is. You feel the pull to sabotage, and you observe it with detached curiosity. You note, the old story is afraid of this success. It is trying to preserve itself. You then calmly proceed with the action anyway. You write the page, you send the email, you have the conversation. Each time you act in spite of the sabotage, you drain its power. You prove to the deep machinery of your psyche that the old rules no longer govern. The immune system learns there is no foreign invader, only the new architect. The alarms grow quieter, then fall silent. The process is one of quiet, relentless sovereignty. You are no longer a tenant in the house of your personality, complaining about the leaks. You are the architect, the contractor, and the foreman. Some days, you are just hauling bricks under a gray sky, with no vision of the cathedral. You do it because that is what the blueprint demands. The unsettling realization is not that you have changed. It is that you are now responsible for what you have become. The old identity, for all its suffering, was a comfortable prison where you were merely an inmate, subject to the warden's whims of genetics and circumstance. The designed self stands in the stark freedom of an empty field you now must cultivate. Under a sky you must now interpret for yourself. There is no one to blame for the harvest. You look in the mirror. The eyes are familiar, but the entity looking out from behind them is a stranger. A competent, calm, slightly formidable stranger. The ghost of the old self sometimes presses against the glass, mouthing old fears, old limitations. You watch it with the mild pity one reserves for a distant relative lost to time. The work is never done, of course. Design is a permanent state. Maintenance is ongoing, but the central struggle has ceased. You are no longer at war with yourself. You have become the government. You have become the law, and the borders of your being are now finally under your own command. Conclusion. There is no neutral state. The new year is a collective fiction, a shared delusion of renewal. The calendar turns, and for a moment, it feels possible to step into a blank space. But you bring the same mind across the threshold, the same architecture, the same silent tenants. The blank space is already occupied. There is no shoreline between the ocean of influence and the island of self. There is only depth and current. You are always in the water. You are either swimming with purpose or you are being carried. To believe in neutrality is to believe you can suspend yourself in the medium, unmoving, while the tides do your work for you. It is the most comfortable and most dangerous of illusions. You either rule your mind or serve someone else's. These are the only two states, sovereignty or servitude. There is no third option. To neglect the throne is not to leave it empty. It is to leave it open for occupation. The world is filled with willing regions, algorithms that will dictate your desires, media that will schedule your fears, institutions that will define your ambitions, individuals who will harvest your attention for their own validation. They do not conquer by force, they administer by default. Your mind is a territory. If you do not patrol the borders, you are not promoting peace. You are inviting colonization. Comfort is the currency of this colonization. It is the warm room that makes the cold outside seem unthinkable. It is the path of least resistance, paved with agreeable narratives, seamless consumption, and the gentle hum of belonging. But comfort creates slaves of a subtle kind. It trades the acute pain of discipline for the chronic, low-grade ache of quiet despair. It asks for small surrenders daily. Your critical thought for a prefabricated opinion. Your focused time for a stream of trivia. Your unique potential for the safety of the template. Each surrender is a vote for a smaller, more manageable life. The comfort you cherish is the signature on your own terms of service. Awareness is not happiness. It is not peace. Awareness is the cold light that shows you the signature, the terms, the confines of the warm. It creates power, not by giving you new tools, but by showing you that you have been living in a workshop, surrounded by levers you never knew you could pull. This power is austere. It is the power of the diagnosed patient who now sees the progression of their own disease in every symptom. They are not cured, but they are no longer ignorant of the mechanism. Thus, the new year does not begin with a resolution. It begins with a realization, a quiet internal shift of authority. The domination of the self is not an act of aggression against the world. It is the meticulous, unending process of evicting the colonizers, of reclaiming the territory of your attention, your emotion, your thought. It is the decision to become the sole, unchallenged source of law in your inner kingdom. This is not a happy ending. It is a declaration of permanent responsibility. The war you didn't know you were in has been named. The battlefield has been mapped. You now know the combatants, the chaotic, comfort-seeking animal of the basal mind, and the cold, future-oriented architect of consciousness. The noise of the world will continue to call, to pull, to offer its comfortable chains. You stand at the beginning, which is also the continuation. The turn of the year is just another day. But now you hear the machinery beneath the silence. You feel the current against your skin. You are in the water. You have always been in the water. Now you must decide. Finally and then again, every single day thereafter, whether to drift or to swim. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Your support means everything and helps this channel grow and reach more people. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting the channel, consider joining as a member to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights. Stay curious, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next one.